So let's talk about the idea of creating a little bit more complicated graphical style that can then be saved and reused like any other graphical style. This one, if you look at it, you can see, you know, you've got the letters that have the light off-white fill on top, but then it looks like there's this kind of blocky connection between the front of the letter going back to the bottom of the letter. Like it almost has a three-dimensional look. The drop shadow has a similar feel to it. There's an offset path here as well that also has that offset, but it's also curving and extending around the bottom side of the letters. So to achieve that, it's a little bit more complicated, comparing that to something like this where there's no connection between this point and this point. Those drop shadows, each layer is just very flat and separate. Very different sort of look. So, and the other thing with this one is we're sort of thinking of it as this is a brand. The brand has some specific colors. You would be often designing things with these colors in the mix, or very much at the forefront if you're working for a company where these are their colors along with black and white or whatever. So starting with those in mind as we got to use these colors, let's begin by making some swatches. So we're going to select each of these colors that we've laid out on the canvas or the artboard. Then we're going to go into swatches and we'll just click new swatch. And we'll just leave this as process color and click OK. Now I'm going to drag this down right here into this new folder. I'll then select each of these, and they're not all nicely just appearing in that new folder, so I'll drag them down one at a time, creating these swatches because we know when we are going to be creating this graphical style, we're going to need these colors, and the easiest way to quickly access them is going to be right from within swatches. They already exist. So there we go. Now from there, what I'm going to do is just take this and we'll try to make it look like the one up above. So firstly, we need to go into appearance. We're going to add a fill, and that fill will be just this cream color. Now of course we do have that right in our swatches, so there it is. That's easy enough. From there, we need to add another fill. Now I'm just going to duplicate this fill by holding down Alt or Option, dragging it down one time. And this fill is going to be orange. So we'll first of all assign that orange color to it. And of course, it exists right underneath the cream colored one, so you can't see it at all yet. But what we'll do is have that selected. We'll go into effects and we're just going to go to transform. And then we want to move this just a little bit to start with. So we're going to make the most tiny little movement so that it's beginning to creep away from the upper fill. And you can't even really see it there, but it's just slightly maybe moving over a little bit. But then if we say make 100 copies of it like that, that all move over just a tiny little bit, over and down, over and down, over and down, then they all add up to being this smooth, relatively smooth transition that looks like it's jumping off the page more, this kind of three-dimensional look. From there, we need another fill, so let's just duplicate again. We'll drag this one down. And for this one, we're going to want it to be gray. So selecting on that fill, there's our gray color. Again, doesn't look like it's there at all because it's behind the other ones at the moment. And we're going to do that same type of thing for this one. But first, we'll do an offset. So we want to go to Path, Offset Path. And in this case, I think I just want to set it to something small, 0.1 inches, and it starts to do this offset. Now we want to take that offset and duplicate its appearance sort of in a progression so that it goes down and then appears underneath, off to the side and underneath the letters. So we'll do that same make copies in tiny little movements approach. So fill, transform, Same thing, just a very small value here. And I'm just using, any small value. This is a small one, so you could use a slightly different one and it wouldn't really matter. I'm going to use 100 copies. You could use more than that or less than that, and you'll get a slightly different look. And then, from there, you can see now that is doing that sort of wraparound look. Now I want to take this fill, and notice that each of these fills has their own, drop-down arrow where this is a fill. That one doesn't have anything going on. It's just at 100% opacity. This one has a transform on it. This one has a couple things going on already, offset path and transform, and we're going to add one more to it. So we'll go in now, and this is where we'll also, off this bigger underlying fill, do our drop shadow. And the drop shadow, I'm keeping it pretty transparent, just 25% opacity, offsetting it 1/4 of an inch in both directions, off to the right and down, and then not blurring it much. So this is a pretty hard-edged, slightly blurry on the edge drop shadow. And then click OK, and that's our graphical look. So from there, we can, go into graphic styles, click the plus when we have this selected, and it's going to appear right there. Now I selected one earlier that's a little bit different in, whatever way, I don't know. It looks like the drop shadow is a little bit more crisp on this one actually, which I think I like more. So I'll go with this one after all, but you get the idea. You can save them over there. And then, down below here, I have a completely different font. The one I was using initially was Impact, which, it looks okay, but I'm not really, it's kind of getting compressed in that letter C. So I could take this now and I could, stretch it or something so I could see some space in there. Or just find a different font that's maybe more conducive to the look I'm going for. And in this case, something like Venue, PF Venue is a nice one. And I could even stretch this one out just a little bit to get some space in between that if I like that look. So from there, we've got a graphical style, and this one can be added to the collection of others that we have, visited and talked about over the course of this series, just by clicking on an object and then assigning that existing graphical style to it. So have fun playing around with these. The more you play around with how to create them, the easier they get to understand what you need to sort of do to create the looks you're going for.